And that's what my lesson today is about, doing good. We're going to talk about doing good, what Christians are supposed to do in doing good. I'm going to be kind of clearing my throat a little bit, so bear with me on that. We're going to talk about the world champion, never to be dethroned, never to be bettered, Jesus Christ. No one could ever outdo him in doing good. He is our prime example of who we should be doing good. We're going to look at some stories. I'm not a preacher. I don't even come close as being a preacher. But I'm a pretty good storyteller. I like to tell stories. I could tell you stories about fishing and driving trucks and just living life. And I could tell you stories about the Bible. I've had 50 some odd years of reading the Bible, and I like to read the Bible. I like to read the stories about the Bible. I don't like too much of the nuts and bolts of putting it together. You know, it kind of gets a little bit hard to read. But if you read the stories about the Bible, it's really interesting stories in there. There's some great stories in there. And we're going to read a few of them. We're going to be in Matthew today. Mostly we're going to be in Matthew, right around the 8th chapter. We're going to jump over to Mark and a couple of stories, but we're going to be in the 8th chapter. Jesus is about 12 years old, and him and his family go to Jerusalem, as every year they do. And his family go there, and they leave. They get about a day's journey away from the town, and his mother and father all of a sudden discover Jesus isn't with them. He's nowhere to be found. And they search the camp up and down, here and there, not to be found. And so they turn around and they head back to town. Now they're one day away from town. You don't jump in the old Chevy and put it in gear and go back. It's a long trip. So now they're 2 days away from Jesus. And the scripture tells us that they searched for 3 days before they found him. And where did they find him? They found him in the temple. And they found him talking to the elders there. And what did they see? They were amazed at his knowledge and his wonder, how wonderfully he spoke to them. And what did Mom say? She was upset. Anybody lose their child at Walmart? Anybody, just for 5 minutes, anybody lose their child in an aisle 2 aisles away, or just instant panic. Instant panic. I mean, we've done it. June and I have lost a child like that, you know. Instant panic. Think 5 days. Why did you do that to us, she says. Why did you do that to us? What was the answer? Did you know I'd be doing my Father's business? This leads up to the kind of what we're going to talk about. He never takes the credit. He never, ever was self-centered about himself. He always gives the Father the credit. Always. He proclaims who he is. He's the Son. But he never, ever centers himself. And all the stories that we're going to read about today, I want you to think about that. It's not about him. It was always about the Father. And the idea, the thought, the plan that God has for us. We're Christians. We're supposed to be different. We're not just plain old people going around We're supposed to be good. We're supposed to be real good. Regular people around and about are good people. You see it all the time. We're supposed to be real good. Jesus, when he becomes a man, we see some serious things that goes on. When the devil took him aside and tried to tempt him, he tempted him with starvation. He tempted him with offering him the whole world. Kneel before me, worship me, and I'll give you everything you can see. He still put him up on the big mountain there, you know. Look out there. This all could be yours. Didn't work, did it? Didn't work at all. As we go through the stories and we look at Jesus, he was poor. He didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. You know, one of our phrases about ourselves, didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. He was humble, very humble. He could have been the most famous person in the world, just with a snap of a finger. He could have been the most famous person. You know, all you have to do is turn on the TV and you see what people are all about in the world. They want fame, they want fortune. He could have been 1,000 million times more famous than anybody you saw on TV all your lives. He is actually, but not at the time of his life. At the time of his life, he was about as poor as you could get. Money-wise, clothes-wise, housing-wise, every way you could think about how we think about monetary gain or whatever, how you want to say it. He was like way down on the scale down there. As a matter of fact, one of the things he told his disciples before he left this world, and he sent the apostles out, he said, don't take a bag. Don't take a bag with you. Don't take money with you. I don't know about you folks, but I've said this before many a time. You ever go camping? You take more stuff out of your house to go out and live in the wilderness than you have in your house to live for 3 or 4 days. And he sends his people out into the world, never to look back over their shoulder, and says, you'll do okay, don't worry about it. That's faith. That's a lot of faith. Don't know if I could do that. I can't hardly, I lived on the road for a lot of years. I always came back home within a week, in the beginning, and I was fortunate enough to get back home every other day, but I'd pack a bag, and my wife would pack a bag for me, and off I'd go, I'd had a little bit of everything in there. Can you imagine doing that? Jesus lived his whole life that way. He never had anything. Foxes had their dens, and birds has their nest, but the Son of Man has no home. He's so humble. He was so humble about himself, even right up to the point of death. He was so humble about himself. Don't you know that I have the power to turn you loose? And what was his answer? You don't have no power over me. I could call down legions of angels to protect me. You don't have no power on me. I am fulfilling my Father's will. You don't have no power over me. But I'm getting a little ahead of my story. I think he was so sad, so sad, that the people that he was trying to be the Savior to didn't believe him. They were turned to be his enemy, the Pharisees, the Sadducees. When he walked through these towns that we're going to read about, so many people loved him, but so many people were devious to him and so wanted to get him. Just get him. I guess that's just the best way to say it. They were planning and just trying to figure out how they could get him. So many times they tried to get him, and some of the stories you can read, they plotted, they come sneaking up behind him, getting ready to get him, and he just vanished. Up on the mountain. Remember that story? He was standing there, and they came around him, they surrounded him, and they were going to lay hands on him and take him away, and he just vanished. He was gone. And they turned around, where was he? He was gone. He had that kind of power because it was not his time. Look up sometime when you have some time and look up the saying, it was not his time. And you will see some really fabulous stories to read. You need to open up your hearts. Every one of us in here today, need to open up your hearts about Jesus. No matter how long you've been a Christian, you need to open up your hearts. Doing good is what we're going to be talking about. Now, we're going to start talking about some stories. So I ask you to lace up your boots, your sandals. You know the old sandals that they wore? They had laces that went all the way up your knee. You're going to put your sandals on, and we're going to start talking. Let's turn to Matthew. Let me catch myself up here. Matthew 8, verses 2 and 4. And I got to find myself. Jesus is walking through Capernaum. And you got to remember something. This fellow draws a crowd. There's no TV, there's no radio, there's no real big sporting events, there's nothing going on. So when Jesus would come through town, he would really get a crowd following him. And his reputation was preceding him wherever he went. And people who were sick, people who had things going on within themselves, knew that Jesus could heal. They weren't sure who he was for the most part, but they did know one thing. If you were sick, there was an opportunity or a chance to be healed. There was a fellow who had leprosy. Now, leprosy has been cured. We have a cure for leprosy now, but that just happened maybe 10 years ago. And it was just a really kind of like a dumb luck thing that happened. They mixed two medicines together, and all of a sudden, bingo, we got a cure for leprosy. But leprosy, for all of mankind up until that time, was a disease that was a scourge of mankind. Leprosy, if you ever get a chance to look it up, is a disease where parts of your body just fall off of you. It's terrible, absolutely devastating disease. And when you had it, you went to an island, or you went to an area in wherever, and you were separated away from mankind. Now this guy had leprosy, and he just thought, if I could get to Jesus. And he goes to Jesus and he says, and behold, a leper came and worshipped him, saying, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Then Jesus put out his hand and touched him, saying, I am willing, be clean, or be cleansed. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. Then Jesus said to him, see that you tell no one, but go yourself your way and show yourself to the priest and offer the gift that Moses commanded as a testimony to them. No fanfare, no, you give me some money and I'll take care of this. No, look at what I can do. You know, we see that on TV a lot. If you're willing, Lord, you can cleanse me. I am willing. And he touched him. That's all. He touched him. And his leprosy was cured. Instantly, his leprosy was cured. And then, he didn't take the credit for it. He said, you go to the priest and show yourself and do what Moses says you're supposed to do. You take a gift to him. That was the end of it. He went about his way. Didn't take the credit, didn't ask for money, didn't want any big fanfare. But what happened? All the people that were around him saw what happened, didn't they? All the people saw. So as he's traveling around, let's go down to verse 13. Verse 5, I'm sorry, down to verse 5. There was a centurion. A centurion is a Roman soldier who has 100 men under his command. And he comes up to Jesus. Now, you've got to understand right off the bat, this is a very interesting thing. This is a Roman talking to a Jew. This really is not supposed to happen. It's not supposed to be. But he had a servant that I have to assume, and assuming is not really supposed to be. I had a very learned man tell me, never assume something in the Bible. But I'm going to assume that he really loved this servant. And he came to Jesus and asked him to do him a favor. He says, Jesus, I have a servant that is just paralyzed, and he's in agony. He's back at my home, and if you're willing, you could cure him. If you would just say from here, you could cure him. And Jesus says, well, I'll go over there. I'll go. He goes, no, you can't come to my house. I'm not even worthy for you to come to my house. I'm not worthy for you to come. This is a Roman soldier saying this to a Jew. I'm not worthy of you to come to my house. But if you will just say, you can cure him. Long distance healing. And Jesus was amazed of the faith of that guy. He was amazed at him. In fact, he says, I've never seen that kind of faith anywhere around here like that. I have not seen that kind of faith. And he says, as your will, as your faith. And that very minute, that servant was healed. That very minute, he was healed. He goes in to Peter's home, finds Peter's mother-in-law sick with a fever. No Bayer aspirins there, nothing to cure her, but you had a fever back then, you just had to wait and see if it broke. And what does he do? Touches her. Just touches her. Breaks the fever, she gets right up and starts serving him. That is the power this man had. I call him a man because he was a man. I think, I spoke before, I think if he hit his thumb with a hammer, he was ouching and carrying on the same as everybody else. But he had the power of God inside of him, so strong, so full of strong. He had the power of good. He is the example of power of good. Let's turn over to Mark, just for a little bit. Mark, the 5th chapter, verse 25 through 29. This is the same area, same story, but I like Mark's version a little better than Matthew's. Matthew's is kind of short. In Mark, we talked about the lady who had the issue of blood. She had this issue of blood for so many years, a flow of blood that never stopped. And not only did she spend all of her money to doctors, but it also says she spent all of what she had trying to get cured of this issue of blood, and nothing worked. And here's Jesus walking through town. And she's got it in her head that if I just touch him, if I only touch him, I could get cured. And she's coming through, kind of wiggling herself through the crowd. Now, I ask you all, how many have been to a sporting event, to a concert, to anything with a big crowd? And you're kind of like this, and you maybe walking out of the concert or out of whatever it's at, and you're getting bumped and you're getting, sometimes it's like a sardines. And that's what's happening here. There's just a lot of people. Jesus is walking out. And she gets up there and she touches him. Like that, she's cured. All those years, all that money, all that, I'll walk off of here, I'll go break my neck. All that money spent, all of her wealth, all of her possessions, and she's cured instantly. And Jesus says, "Who touched me?" He turns around and asks one of his disciples. That would be like, I turn around and I say to Ken, "Who touched me?" And I look right at you and I say, "Who touched me?" And Ken's going, "Oh, we're kind of like in a big crowd here, Jesus. We're in a pretty big crowd here, Jesus. I don't know who touched you." He said, "I felt the power go out of me." You ever have a flashlight kind of going down, like the battery's going out, and you can see the light getting dimmer, or your battery in the car when you turn the key on, and you can see that battery just kind of getting dim. That's what Jesus felt when this lady touched him. He felt the power inside of him going out. And she owns up to it and says, "That was me. I touched you. I knew if I touched you, I'd get cured." That's the power of Jesus. Prior to that, I kind of jumped somebody. but it's a really great story. Kind of got ahead of myself. Jesus is walking, and there's a guy up in the tombs. The tombs are, they're kind of like a burial area. And he is like the strongest guy I think anybody could ever see. They used to bind him with chains. They used to he was crazy. And Jesus is walking up towards him, and, he screams out to him, "What do I have to do with you?" And Jesus says, "Who are you?" And he says, "I am Legion. We are many. Legion is 1,000. And Jesus casts out of him, puts him in the swine. This guy was like, to break the chains. They recognized who Jesus was. They recognized who he was. We'll go back to Matthew. Even when he was doing good, even when he was doing all of the wonderful things that we've just talked about, they still plotted against him. The Pharisees and the Sadducees, they went out of their way to bring false witness against him. We have the best example of doing good. We're Christians. We can't just do good. We have to do very, very good. We have the best example in the world to look to. So, how do we do good? Well, one thing, I just got a card in the mail. The guy's name was Jackson. Pretty good. It was pretty cool. Or we got a card in the mail, which is, "We're happy you're here," with some little scriptures in it. Or you can make people feel welcome. Excuse me. Or we can go about our business and we can go out of our way to do good. That means I don't care how old you are or how young you are, it doesn't matter. There are always opportunities for us to do good. You're out and about in the world, and people are looking at you. There's people that know who you are, your neighbors, the friends around, your friends, You have the opportunity over and over to do good. We were coming back up from the Carolinas, and I had a flat tire. And I got all these, things that, from the insurance companies that will come out and change your tires, We had the two little, call them the tornadoes, but they're not the tornadoes anymore, my two little grandchildren. Car is packed full. So I'm unloading the thing, waiting for the guy. Nobody showed up. So I was like, all right, I'm going to change the flat tire. We had 2 or 3 people stop. And I said, we got it, All of a sudden, some guy pulls up behind us. He just gets out of the car, his truck, and he just flops down on the ground alongside of us, starts changing the tire with me. I can't tell you how many times I've done that same thing. Pat on the back, but I have. What goes around comes around. You You get paid back. You see somebody in need, you do good. Your reward is going to be a smile. Your reward is going to be a look of astonishment. In this day and age, your reward will be a look of astonishment because nobody is doing that anymore. Those days are kind of gone. Everybody's afraid. Everybody's afraid that, you're going to attack them or something. Your reward is if you're sitting there in McDonald's and the guy's sitting there looking and counting his change out, you throw a couple bucks on the counter and you walk away. Your reward is how you feel in here when you do good. Your reward is knowing that you're doing what God wants you to do. Your reward is following what Christ has done, all them things that we just read about. He didn't ask for a reward. He didn't ask for any acknowledgement. You don't need an acknowledgement. You get it right here, right in your heart. If you don't get that, you don't get it at all. You're not even getting it up here. You ain't figured it out yet. That's what it's all about. That's who we are. We are Christians. We are followers of God. If you ain't got that figured out, you need to sit down and rethink your thinking. Because in the end, just like we heard in our prayer, life is short. In the end, everybody's going to have to make a meeting with God. And you don't want your tally sheet being a little short on doing good. You definitely don't want that. You don't want to be standing there before God and Him saying, you know what? You had a lot of opportunities to do some good. You had a lot of opportunities that you could have maybe turned this guy around by your attitude. We are Christians. If you're not a Christian, I hope this lesson opens your eyes up about who you could be. That God will be very pleased with you if you become a Christian. If you're not a Christian, you don't have a chance. You just don't have a chance. You have to be. You have to follow the law. You have to follow what God set up. It's not man set up. Make no mistake about this. God sets the rules. Man follows the rules. God says, you got to be here as a Christian. Please understand that. Not my words, not the elders' words, not anybody's other word, but Christ's. He said, if you're not born again, you're not going to make it. No matter what, you're not going to make it. Nobody can buy you into heaven. Nobody can pray you into heaven. Only you can make yourself eligible to make it into heaven. Please stand and sing.